And you know, and one thing that I do know of the Lord is that if we trust Him with our whole heart and we ask Him, He will move. It may not be exactly the way that in our minds, the way that we think, but He does. He does what only He can do, and He has sustained me through things that I never thought that I could ever make it through, and He's still doing that for me today, and for that I'm very thankful. And so yeah, we'll just get right into it.
It's me again. I'm going to be nice tonight. Louise done fussed at me before we even came in, but I figured since we dressed alike, I better listen to her. That's right. But if you have your Bibles tonight, we're going to be in Nehemiah 5, continue on with our study with Nehemiah. It's been a couple weeks since we've done Nehemiah. Last week was our commission service, and this is the first time that I've taught on Nehemiah. Ron and John and TJ's been taking care of it. But if you've not been with us in the study, in the book of Nehemiah, in essence, it's the book of rebuild that Nehemiah has seen the ruins and is wanting to, or not seen the ruins, but has heard of the ruins and is wanting to go back to build. And so then in chapter 4, we see the enemies using the tool or weapon of ridicule. Ridicule the work that's been done, that, even the foxes could come through and knock the wall down, okay? But we see that Nehemiah continues to pray and work, okay? And then later on in chapter 4, we see that they see that the ridicule didn't affect the progress, and that's something the enemy will do. A lot of times it's not the big major battles that we go through. It's just the little things that people will say. Maybe sometimes it's completely harmless, or they meant it to be harmless. But the devil can use that and use it as a wedge and just keep burning us with it, like a sear, if we allow it to. But we got to have the mind of Nehemiah, who continued to work and pray. So once they saw that their words didn't create the problem that they wanted, then they decided we're just going to come in and destroy the wall. Okay? So Nehemiah prayed and continued to work. Okay? Then later on in chapter 4, then we're going to see some internal problems. The enemy is going to kind of come within. And so Nehemiah says, all right, through his prayers, he decides we're going to work, but we're also going to defend ourselves. And that's where chapter 4 ends. The people still with the mind of work. Now they are a trowel in one hand, a sword in the other hand. Okay? So they're kind of pulling double duty, if you will. Okay? They're ready to fight if they need to fight, but they still got a mind to work and are continuing to work. Okay? And so that's going to bring us into chapter 5. And chapter 5 is going to be internal problems once again. Okay? One of the things that you'll see here in chapter 5 as we go through it, that by all indications, the work has now stopped. They're not working on the wall no more. By the end of chapter 5, going into chapter 6, there are several reports going out that the wall has been completed. And it has for the most part, except for the gates have not been put back up yet. But at this point in time, the wall, there's really no mention here in chapter 5 of work being done on the wall. Okay? So just continue on with the outline that some of the others have used. Chapters 1 through 7, so we got 3 more chapters tonight, 5, 6, and 7, that'll go to the actual building of the wall and the problems going on with it. It started with Nehemiah's prayer for the remnant of Jerusalem in chapter 1. Nehemiah's request to the king to return to Jerusalem to review the ruins of it. And then Nehemiah's encouragement to rebuild the wall, the rebuilding of the wall in chapter 3. And then 4 through 6 is Nehemiah's response to the opposition. Remember, Nehemiah was a cupbearer in the king's court. Kind of a high, you think about it, it's it's kind of not a job that has a lot of room for error in it, But also with that, though, you had to be very dignified. You had to have a good appearance. It had to be something, you had to be schooled. You had to be somewhat of a scholar to be in the king's court with all this. They just didn't want just anybody in there being this cupbearer. And that's what Nehemiah is. He's a cupbearer. But then his heart is turned toward his homeland and wanting to go back and rebuild the wall. So if you got your Bibles here, we'll go ahead and read here the first 5 verses of Nehemiah in chapter 5. It says, "And there was a great cry of the people and of their wives against the brethren, their brethren, the Jews. For there were that said, We, our sons and our daughters, are many, therefore we take up corn for them, that we may eat and live. Some also there were that said, We have mortgaged our lands, vineyards, and houses, that we might buy corn, because there is a dearth," or there's a famine, there's lack of food. "There were also that said, We have borrowed money for the king's tribute," or the taxes, "and that upon our lands and vineyards. And now our flesh is as the flesh of our brethren, and our children as their children. And lo, we bring into bondage our sons and our daughters to be servants, and some of our daughters are brought into bondage already. Neither is there any, is it in our power to redeem them. For other men have their lands and vineyards." So when we talk about the internal problems that's going on, this is a money problem, a financial problem that has occurred. And the finance problem has occurred is that for several different reasons, okay? One, there's a famine. So anytime that there's a lack of food, guess what happens to prices? Anybody been to the grocery store lately? In the last several years, prices go up. Why? Supply and demand. There's not a lot of supply, but still a lot of demand. Prices are going to go up. So that's what they're dealing with here. There's a famine, okay? It can be for natural reasons, just a drought. A drought will cause a famine. So it doesn't give a lot of detail as to why they're in famine. They're just in a famine, okay? And so there's some money problems that's going on. So now the people have come to Nehemiah, and they're complaining. We've been doing all this work. Because remember, the wall's going to be completed in 52 days, but I doubt any of us could not have any financial income come in for 52 days and not feel the effects of it, okay? We're going to need food. We'll need things. And so the people are coming and complaining, if you will, to Nehemiah, that we've been doing all this work, there's a famine, and so you're going to get 3 different groups of people that are coming. One, there were those who were without land, therefore they didn't have food. Okay? Kind of going back to the biblical times, if you don't work, you don't eat. Well, if there's a famine, you can work all you want to, you're still not going to be able to grow nothing. So there were some who didn't have land, therefore they needed food. And then there were those who were forced to take their land and sell it because they needed money to buy food because of the famine. And then those who borrowed money in order to pay the taxes. And it says high taxes. Nehemiah doesn't really particularly say that it was a high tax, but again, if things are bad, it doesn't take much taxes for it to, have an effect on everyone, okay? But the Persians had, they still had to pay their taxes. Some of their own brethren had taken advantage of the hard lot of the others by taking mortgages at excessive interest or usury. About a 12% tax, okay, is what they're looking at here. Not necessarily unnecessary, but it was, if you go back to Levitical law, you couldn't take someone who was in need and kind of put them over a barrel, if you will. Okay? So when poor people, you loan them money, you couldn't loan them money with an interest rate. So you have some of the ones who were more wealthy at this point in time who's trying to take advantage of everybody's hardships. Okay? You need some money, we'll give you money. And so they're raising the interest rates and all these things here as well. Okay? Does anybody have anything? All right. So one of the things that we need to note in this right here is the fact that when we went back in chapter 4 and I told you about the enemy giving words of ridicule, we see the enemy coming at them and physically trying to destroy the wall. Then we see, the enemy working their way in and trying to disrupt the people here. The work continued. But as I said before, go all the way through chapter 5 here, you don't hear anything about work. And so one of the number one tools of the devil is this. If he can disrupt unity amongst God's people, the work will cease. That is the reason for no work being done at this point in time. The enemy tried every way in the world to stop the building of the wall or the rebuilding of the wall. But all it took was God's people to not see eye and eye and start complaining amongst themselves, and the work's not done. Okay? So they're not unified right here. They're fighting amongst themselves, and no work is getting done. Okay? So we pick up back here in verse 6. And I was very angry, of course this is Nehemiah talking, when I heard their cry and these words. Then I consulted with myself and rebuked the nobles and the rulers and said to them, ye exact usury, again taking advantage of high interest rates here, if you will, every one of his brother, and I set a great assembly against them. And I said unto them, we after our ability have redeemed our brethren the Jews, which were sold unto the brethren, and ye even sell your brethren. Okay, again, remember where they came from. Nehemiah and them have been in slavery themselves, okay? So now they're saying it's 6 years later, we're starting to put our kids back into slavery now, trying to make ends meet, okay? Then held they their peace and found nothing to answer. So get some pretty harsh words here from Nehemiah. Now, if you notice at the very beginning of that, Nehemiah says, I was angry. I was very angry at their words. Then I consulted with myself. Great leadership principle right there. And TJ brings out the leadership part of this right here. But he was mad, but what did he do? I consulted with myself. So he's running this through his head. He's starting to say, how's best to handle this? So it kind of goes back to the biblical principle. You can be angry, but sin not. So he didn't go in and just start browbeating everybody. He didn't just go in and start just saying, well, you all, da-da-da-da-da, here's what we're supposed to be doing. Here's what we said from the very get-go. God's going to take care of it. God said build a wall. Let's build a wall, da-da-da-da-da. He's giving them a little history lesson here of how God's hand has delivered them before. When they have a mind to work, everything else will take care of itself, okay? And so he's giving them a little lesson here too. Keep the main thing the main thing. What's the main thing? The ministry. And we'll see several principles in this as we go through and look at this chapter here, because it's all about the money, okay? It's all about the money, and so the money and people worrying about the money has caused the work to cease. First of all, if you ever want to make a lot of money, don't go into ministry. Okay? That should never be the selling point of why people want to go into the ministry for financial gain. Because the Bible tells us to be a giver. Okay? So you go in the ministry, and as God blesses, we're to use it to bless others. Okay? So Nehemiah's giving them a little bit of example of this right here and telling them, hey, let's keep the main thing. We're all in the ministry. We've all been doing the Lord's work. And because we're doing the Lord's work, He's going to take care of us. He'll take care of what we need. But when we start looking at our needs and putting that at the very first thing, then the work has ceased now, okay? The work has ceased. Okay, and pick back up here in verse 9. He says, also I said, it is not good that you do. Ought ye not to walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the heathen, our enemies. So in other words, let's not act like them, who's motivated by greed and want. I likewise and my brethren and my servants might exact of them money and corn, I pray you. Let us leave off the usury. In other words, we're not trying to take advantage of the less fortunate. Restore, I pray to you, and he's talking to the nobles now, to them even this day, their lands, their vineyards, their olive yards, their houses also, the 100th part, that's where the 12% comes in, of the money, of the corn, the wine, the oil, that ye exact of them. Okay, so remember, it goes back to what I said before. By being a cupbearer, Nehemiah kind of knew the ins and outs of government and how it was supposed to be working. Okay, so he's telling the nobles here, you're not in any position to take advantage of these people as well. Okay, because remember, who gave Nehemiah permission to go and build the wall? The king did. Okay, so it's not like it's a bunch of rebels that came in and said, we're going to secretly build this wall or anything. The king gave permission for them to go and was even paying for them and supplying the materials for them to rebuild with. Okay, so Nehemiah here is giving them a little bit of lesson. All right, so as I said before, lending money to the poor at interest was forbidden. It goes back to the Levitical law, Exodus 22:25. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not to him be a usury, in other words, a money lender, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury or interest. In other words, you can give them money, but don't try to take advantage of them by charging them interest and making money off of the poor. So Nehemiah is very angry when this is called to his attention, and he forces the greedy heathen to restore back all that had been taken before. Okay? So again, a lot of times when we talk about in the ministry money being a problem, it's because you started something in the building project, then you ran out of money, and now money's a problem. That's not necessarily the case here. The case here is that they've been so dedicated to the building that their livelihood has been disrupted. They've not been going to work, earning money, on top of a famine and all these other things, and it's caused a lot of problems for them. Okay? It's not the lack of materials. They've got the materials because you go back to Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, and it talks about how that the king of Persia has provided the materials that they needed to build the wall with. Okay? So when we look at the money problems here, it's not a lack of money. It's just they don't have the money to supply the things that they need, the food and things. Okay? Anybody got anything? All right. Verse 12. Then said they, we will restore to them and will require nothing of them. So in other words, we'll give them back what we've taken, and we're not going to, no interest or anything like that. So we will do as thou sayest. Then I called the priest, Nehemiah talking here, and took an oath of them that they should do according to this promise. Also I shook my lap and said, so God shake out every man from his house and from his labor that performeth not this promise. Even thus be he shaken out and emptied. In other words, what he's saying with this right here is we're going to kind of solidify this promise. It's not just going to be lip service. I hear you saying you're going to do it, but we're going to take action and you're going to be held accountable for your word. Okay? So don't just tell me you're going to do it. Let me know, show me that you're going to do it. And all the congregation said, amen, and praise the Lord. And the people did according to this promise. So again, going back to the principles of the leadership, okay, Nehemiah is showing himself to be a very good leader. And he was doing it the way that God wanted them to do it, okay? These weren't Nehemiah's ideals, but he was teaching them principles of just life in general, okay? Those with, help those without. But don't do it as in, for a gain. Do it out of a giving heart. Do it out of your love, okay? So then in verse 12, the brethren take the oath. They will restore what's taken. Nehemiah threatens to deal with them severely if need be, if they don't carry out with the agreement. And that's the reason why he gets them to solidify it, talking about we're shaking it out. Verse 14 says, moreover, from the time that I appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year even until the 30th year of Artaxerxes, the king, that is 12 years, I and my brethren have not eaten the bread of the governor. But the former governors that had been before me were chargeable unto the people, and had taken of them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Yea, even their servants bear rule over the people. But so not I, because of the fear of God. Okay, so the connections of Nehemiah, what he's saying is that when he came to build the wall, he's not been any different from the people. He being the cupbearer was getting the best of the best. He ate at the table with the king. Of course, he got to sample all the king's food first, but he also ate of it himself. And so all these things was being supplied to him. But what he's saying is here, I fear the Lord, and so I've not been tapping into the king's resources. I'm dependent upon God taking care of us all. No different than the rest of you all. I've not been receiving my salary from the king as a cupbearer while I've been here at work as well. Okay? So we've all, for whatever day they're in, we know it took them 52 days to build it, so they're close. So he's saying, I've not been tapping into those resources as either. As a good leader, he's leading by example. I'm doing it the same way that I'm asking you all to doing it. Okay? And so what he's saying is here is that he's given us the example of how to handle money by being a good giver. Okay? And I didn't get chapter 5 so that we can start trying to, build up the offering or anything else like that. Because it really, until I started studying this here, a lot of times, and we do this, and of course, Bob takes care of our money. Everything that I get's direct deposit. I haven't seen $1 in a long time. I get a card, and then I get this here. I got the check statement, Jason. That means don't use the card none for a while. So she takes care of her money and does a great job with it. Okay, she's very good at accounting, especially accounting my money. But I'm glad y'all picked that out. But with this though, and it talks about in here of how that so many times that we think of doing God's work and the heart that we have toward that, and then money. But even in this, and the commentaries and stuff that I was reading was talking about how that even like a career change, buying a vehicle, all these things here are matters in which we should pray about. And a lot of times we don't pray about them. We'll just look at the checking account and say, oh, I can afford this. I'm going to do it. Or, oh, this is a better opportunity than this is. I'm going to do it. Okay? But every matter, and it goes back to what Nehemiah's talking about right here with the ministry. How is it going to affect your relationship with the Lord? Every financial decision you make, we should ask ourselves those questions. Is it going to put a strain on me to where it's going to affect me and how my light is shining to other people? Because I'm worried about the money, and I got to make money on this and this and this and this to pay for this and this and this and this. Well, we probably didn't pray for it or pray about it, because now paying for all this stuff becomes more important than the main thing. What's the main thing? Your ministry. You say, well, I'm not a minister. Yeah, you are if you're a Christian. Got to let your light shine. Again, it's not saying that making money is wrong, nor is it bettering yourself or purchasing things or whatever else. But it should become a spiritual matter to where you pray. And sometimes it's the fact that God might just say you're not spiritually mature enough yet too. You can afford it financially, but you can't afford it spiritually because you're not strong enough. Okay? And so when I got into reading this, and of course, I'm great at getting on rabbit trails and just taking out. So I started looking into it more. I thought, wow, that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of times we'll do it. It's in the checking account. Let's get it. But is it going to affect us spiritually? Is it going to be something? And I made this, I can tell you the time I did this. When I first got my first horse, Dad used to get me ponies when we were growing up, and then my papa would trade them for mules all the time. But when I first got my first horse that I purchased, well, I didn't really purchase. I think Dad had given me a collection of knives from Westmoreland or something. And he said, you can have these knives. They're worth about whatever. Well, I found me a horse that was worth that much, and I traded those knives for that horse. Okay? All my dreams have come true. I can't help it. I've tried to explain this to everybody my entire life. I love horses. And it's in me from my papa. And I made a promise with the Lord in the back of our house on Indian Creek with that pony/horse on a lead rope back there eating grass, that as long as he would bless me with horses, I would never allow it to take me away from what he's called me to do. I'm about 15 years old at that time. So I've always tried to, every time that I think, okay, I'm going to go here and do this here and just go here and do this right here, God always would remind me of that. It better never pull me away from church, okay? Or it should never become the love that would pull me away from my relationship with him or not. Okay, I can tell you one good thing I did, but I can tell you 10,000 bad things that I've done too, okay? But that's one thing that I still remember, that I made that promise, that God, that if you would let me have this horse, that I'll not let it, and I still have horses, and I still try to keep them in their proper place, all right? But I think that's one of the things that we should do with all of our finances, that we keep them in the proper place. God, you gave me that home. God, you gave me that vehicle. God, you gave me this right here. Help me to use these things to honor you with, okay? That money in my checking account, God, you gave that to me. Help me to never try to hold back from what you've given me, but to continue to give to you, okay? That was all free. Not even, TJ didn't even say, hey, well, you're teaching on this, throw in a couple of jabs to help finance the church. No, he didn't say nothing about this, okay? So anyway, Nehemiah and his leadership, and he's doing it for, as an example. It says, moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor, as we said before, and then he's going to tell them all the things that he's done where he's not taken the salary. Verse 16, yea, also, I continued in the work of this wall. Okay? So the same thing that he's encouraging all of them to do, it's not like he's been getting, money or food sent down his way. Neither brought we any land, and all my servants were gathered thither unto the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 of the Jews and rulers, besides those that came unto us from among the heathen that are about us. Okay? So these people are coming in and saying, well, we've got a lot of kids. We need a lot of corn. Nehemiah said, I'm having 150 plus around my table that he's brought in to help rebuild the wall and do work as well. I'm having to feed them, okay? Plus some of the heathen coming in and eating with us as well. Now that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox, 6 choice sheep. Also fowls were prepared for me. Once in 10 days, store of all sorts of wine. Yet for all this required not I the bread of the governor. Okay? So Nehemiah has taken from his own and gave this. It's not what's came down to him from the king. Okay? Because the bondage was heavy upon this people. Think upon me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. Okay? So on this here, Nehemiah has been on leave of absence as well, as we said, from his cupbearer, from King Artaxerxes. And he has refused to accept his salary that was paid to him for the governor of Israel, which came from taxing the people. For example, or his example should have been an inspiration to all those that was around him. Okay? So a couple points here to finish up with. So Nehemiah is teaching them that a leader should deal with the problem directly. Okay? Nehemiah couldn't say, well, I'm busy and I got all these other things to do. I'll send somebody else to go take care of this problem. What does Nehemiah do? He goes and addresses the people himself. Okay? And he scolds them a little bit to listen, it's going to be okay. We're doing the Lord's work. Don't start coming untied. And remember I taught on that. Brother Lee had taught Sunday school for those of you that was in here that time. Well, back there that time. And he talked about unity and untied and just the one letter that separates it. And we can be unified, or one letter can cause us to be untied. Okay? And that's what Nehemiah has come to him. Listen, we can't come untied here. We're doing the Lord's work. Let's stay together. Let's stay together. Then what does Nehemiah do? As a leader now, he's going to go and he's going to talk to the officials, the noblemen and all this, and say, hey, you're taking advantage of these people, and you shouldn't be doing that. He's standing up for his people. Okay? And then the third thing he's going to do is he's going to go to the priest. Okay? And he's going to say, and you all are accountable to this as well. That everyone continues to do their job. Which is just an example of what we saw in chapter 4. When all the enemies was coming against Nehemiah, what did he do? He worked and prayed. He prayed and continued to work. And so now that there's some, chatter amongst the people, and they're becoming disunified, he's bringing the ranks back together. He's talking to all the people, and he's getting their eyes back on what they were called to do. Rebuild the wall. Another leadership principle. Okay? Can't forsake the work, but you also can't forsake the people doing the work. So Nehemiah here has, if we need to time out on the floor here and address some situations, we'll address the situations. But we're not going to be in a long time out. Let's get everything back in order. Let's get back to what the main portion of the first 5 chapters is. The people had what? A mind to work. So when the enemy comes in, and that's where he's going to affect you as well. Everybody in here can say there was a time once when I really had a mind to work. And I did a lot. Then you can also look back and see a time when you wasn't doing very much. Okay? And it's just like what we're supposed to do. We're not all going to be burning hot all the time, ready to go and do. But that's the purpose of us staying unified. They might be somebody over here beside the wall on you one day, and maybe they're not just slapping the mortar up the way they once did. They're not whistling while they work no more. Well, what's our job? We need to encourage them. Say, hey, come on, man, you've been doing really good work here lately. Notice, slacking off. Or Louise, she fussed at me Sunday night when I got through teaching. And I was thankful that she did. It was good. She didn't fuss at me bad. She fussed at me for fussing at myself. Okay? So we see Nehemiah here being that leader. And then he finishes with, let's keep the main thing the main thing. Think upon me, my God, for the good according to all that I have done for this people. Okay? Not so they're going to look at Nehemiah, but all Nehemiah is doing, hey, keep your eye on the work. Keep your eye on the one that we're working for. Keep the main thing the main thing. All right? Anybody have anything? Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it goes back to a lot of what I was saying at the very beginning. God knows our heart, and He knows what we can handle and what we can't handle. And that comes from trials and tribulations, but it also comes with finances as well. I mean, you look at these big lottery winners, and they Did money solve their problems? No, it magnified them because they couldn't manage their life when they didn't have much. Now they got a lot and they still can't manage their life. And so you got even that much more going wrong, you know. And so, like Sister Sarah said, you know, it comes back and look at Solomon. He wanted wisdom. You know, God's not going to bless a fool with anything because why? We're not going to take care of it. He will bless us so that people can say, wow. And they see God in that, in blessing us. Why? So that we can bless other people. And, you know, y'all have heard it before. Things Tommy said and TJ said and other deacons and people who's got up here and spoke and talk about when we was going to build this, but we didn't have the money, and then boom, there was the money. And then we was going to build this, but we didn't really have the money, and we was praying about it. Boom, there the money showed up. Okay? And I could tell you a couple where the boom money came from, but most of them I can't because it just boom money showed up and somebody made a generous contribution, but they didn't do it because they said, hey, put my picture out there on the main thing, I'll give you some money. They just want to see God's work continue. And then we, as faithful stewards, do outreach and help and minister to other people and try to, you know, love on everybody that we can. God continues to bless. And when we stop that and we start hoarding up, we're not being wise with God's blessings and we can't expect them. But as long as we are doing our job, God's always going to do his job. Always. Anybody else? Well, if not, then that is chapter 5. Our pastor will be back with us on Sunday, I believe. At least he's scheduled to preach. So let's go praying for them as they'll be returning back home here in the next couple of days. Anything else? If not, then let's stand and we'll be dismissed in a word of prayer. Brother Steve, would you dismiss us?